Hello and welcome to the Syriac language course, or the course on the Reshono Sirioyo. My name is Phillip and this course is designed to take you through the whole learning process of the Syriac language, starting from the origins of the language all the way to reading through Syriac texts. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the origins of Syriac and how it developed out of Aramaic. Then we're going to talk about early literature and key writers of Classical Syriac from the 1st to 4th centuries. Then we'll talk about the Golden Age and writers in that period from the 5th to 9th centuries. Then we're going to go over the Olaph-Beth, or the alphabet of Syriac, as well as the vowels and some other notable punctuation that will be key and important for us to be able to start learning words in Syriac and reading through the text. So, the origins of Syriac language. Syriac is a form of Aramaic, a language whose many dialects have been in continuous use since the 11th century BC. Originally the language of the Aramean people, Aramaic became the lingua franca of the Near East by the 6th century BC. It was the native tongue of the ancient Chaldeans, a second language to the Assyro-Babylonians, an official language of the Persian Achaemenians, and a common language of the Jews replacing Hebrew. Jesus and the apostles spoke and preached in Aramaic. Syriac is the Aramaic dialect of Edessa, which is present-day Urfa in southeast Turkey, a center of early intellectual activity. It became an important literary language around the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The earliest dated Syriac inscription is from 6 AD, and the earliest parchment, a deed of sale, is from 243. The earliest dated manuscript was produced in November 411, probably the earliest dated manuscript in any language. The oldest of the Syriac scripts, known as Estrangelo, meaning rounded, was fully developed by the 5th century. Later, 2 geographic scripts would derive from it: West Syriac, whose proper name is Serto, and East Syriac. We are going to use Serto in our Syriac course. Estrangelo and East Syriac will be discussed a little bit, but it is mostly the Serto script, which we will introduce later, that will be the one that we use. The Syriac writing system lent its vocalization system to Hebrew and Arabic in the 7th century, before which Semitic languages were written using consonants only. At the time of Genghis Khan in the 12th century, the Mongolian script was also derived from Syriac. The spread of Syriac was due to at least 2 factors: the spread of Christianity in the Semitic-speaking world, and commerce on the Silk Road, both activities sometimes combined. A testimony of this rather remarkable expansion is a bilingual Chinese and Syriac monument from Sian in China, constructed in 781. Likewise, today, a few million Christians in India of various denominations follow the Syriac tradition. Within a few centuries from its origin, Syriac produced a wealth of literature in all sorts of fields: literary, philosophical, liturgical, scientific, historical, and linguistic, to name but a few. So on the slide here, you see this is the earliest inscription that we have of Syriac that dates to 6 AD. As you can see, its script looks very squarish. If you're familiar with Hebrew or Aramaic, that is the reason why. It's because the square script was used in Aramaic, and Syriac is a development out of Aramaic. And so we would expect to see that the earliest forms of Syriac would in fact have a script similar to Aramaic, and that's what we find. Early literature from the 1st to 4th centuries. East Syriac literature was produced in Mesopotamia, especially in and around Edessa, by pagans, agnostics, Jews, and Christians. Over 60 inscriptions, mostly pagan, and a few papyri from the first 3 centuries have come down to us. The language of these is midway between official Aramaic, i.e. the Aramaic that we receive from official documents, and literary Syriac, and represents the early development of the Syriac language. The literature of the first 3 centuries consists mostly of anonymous texts whose date and origin cannot be easily established. However, by the year 200, the books of the Old Testament were all translated from Hebrew, probably by Syriac-speaking Jews and early Jewish converts. The earliest form of the New Testament, the Diatessaron, a harmony of the 4 Gospels, also appears around the same time. A full translation of the Greek New Testament followed, except for books like Revelation and some of the Catholic epistles. Those were not translated into Syriac, but the versions of those that we have today are a later translation, in fact. To this period also belong the Odes of Solomon, 42 short lyrical poems, the story of the Aramaean sage Ahikar, a narrative set in the time of the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who lived from 740 to 681 BC, which is given as a reading in our study later in the course, and also the Acts of Judas Thomas, a narrative of the apostles' mission to India. The 4th century witnessed the first major writings that survive till this day. Of the writings of the Persian sage Aphrahat, 23 demonstrations survive, 22 of which from an alphabetic acrostic. Amongst the topics discussed are faith, love, prayer, war, humility, the Sabbath, and food. Another work of this period is the anonymous Book of Steps, dealing with spiritual direction. The most celebrated writer of this period, however, is Saint Ephraim the Syrian. He is the theologian poet par excellence, and, quote, perhaps the only theologian poet to rank beside Dante, end quote, as one scholar, Robert Murray, suggests. Saint Ephraim produced a wealth of theological works in prose and artistic poetry. His fame resulted in many writings of later centuries to be expositions, refutations, letters, and various other forms of poetry. His fame resulted in many writings of later centuries to be attributed to him. Of his genuine works, however, we have received many commentaries, expositions, refutations, and above all, poetry. We will be reading some of his works later in the course as well. The Golden Age, 5th to 9th centuries. This period witnessed a major intellectual activity in the Syriac-speaking world. Over 70 important writers are known, not counting numerous anonymous works and the writings of lesser authors. Almost all of the writers wrote across many disciplines, though some names stand out in specific fields. Amongst the many poets, we receive the writings of Narsai, Jacob of Serug, and of the biblical commentators, Ishodad of Merv and John of Dara stand out. The mathematicians and astronomers include Sergius of Reshaina and Severus Sebokht. Also, George of the Arabs is worthy to be mentioned. Those who wrote on grammar and rhetoric include Jacob of Edessa, Anton of Takrit, and Isho bar Nun. The 5th century witnessed the division of the Christian church into many factions. It is worth noting that the Syriac tradition is the only linguistic tradition that represents the rich diversity resulting from this division, and preserves it till this day. The Christological controversies produced many theological debates. Amongst the most prominent apologists were Philoxenos of Mabug and Babi the Great. Theologians of the period also include Dadisho, Isaac of Nineveh, Timothy I, Moshe bar Kepha, and Theodore bar Koni. These are not mentioned on the slides, but they are worthy of note. One could go on naming famous authors whose works have come down to us. Suffice it to say that the Golden Age covered all fields of study under the sun: philosophy, logic, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, alchemy, history, theology, linguistics, and literature. A great deal of scholarly activities were centered in schools and monasteries throughout Syria and Mesopotamia as well. Of the schools we cannot but mention are the school of Edessa, the school of Nisibin, and that of Kenishrin. These, among others, produced many of the best-known scholars. It is remarkable that a few of the monastic schools of this period are still in use today, most notably Mor Gabriel's monastery in southeast Turkey and Mar Musa, Moses, the Ethiopian, in Syria. So the period from the 9th century until present we will not actually cover because not much can really be said about that period. Basically what happened is the Syriac language began to die down in its use. It began to only be used by the clergy and the church until relatively recently there's been a revival and interest in the Syriac language in the scholarly world and among certain groups of Christians. today. So this slide here shows the influence of the Peshitta. The Peshitta is the Old Syriac translation of the Bible. When I say Old Syriac, I don't mean Old Syriac as the form of the language, but I mean it is the ancient to early medieval translation of the biblical text of the New Testament. And this map shows its influence, where it was used throughout all the Middle East, parts of North Africa, and in Arabia, and even as far as China and India. Now we're going to talk about the Olaph-Beth, or in English we would say the alphabet. In Syriac, there are 22 letters. You can call what we see here different scripts, as most people do. However, it's better to think of it as you have one script, but different fonts. And so what you see here in this top script is the Syriac alphabet in Estrangelo. That was the original form of the Syriac alphabet that developed. And then from the Estrangelo, we have West Syriac, which is here in the middle, also called Serto. We will be using this form of the alphabet in our study of Syriac throughout the course. And then you have East Syriac, which is down here, the third one in the row, in the column. And East Syriac is how the script developed in the East, but it is not going to be used in this course. East and West Syriac also use distinct dialects, so not only is the script different, but the way they pronounce some vowels is also a bit different, and some of the vocabulary and a little bit of the grammar and syntax is different as well, but for the most part they're the same. And by learning West Syriac, you will be able to read with ease anything written in East Syriac as well. And Syriac is written right to left, like several other Semitic languages. So these are the consonants. Olaf, Beth, Gomal, Dolath, He, Waw, Zain, Chet, Tet, Yud, Kof, Lomad, Mim, Nun, Simkath, Ea, Fe, Sode, Kof, Rish, Shin, and Tau. If I was speaking too fast there, don't worry. We're going to go through each one individually, one by one. Starting with Olaf. Olaf. Olaf doesn't have a sound. In Hebrew, it's the equivalent of aleph, which is a glottal stop. In other words, it just tells you in a word where you should have a glottal stop, where you should stop having air come out of your mouth and making a pronunciation with what you're trying to say. However, in Syriac, it more often takes on the vowel that it goes with. So Olaf can be pronounced in a number of different ways, depending on the vowel you see it with in the text. This will become more clear when we start to practice reading Syriac words, so don't worry. Just know that this is Olaf, and it takes on different vowel sounds. The next letter is Beth. Beth is pronounced like a B sound in English, B. It can also be pronounced like a V sound, V. But we will learn more about that later. For now, just know this is Beth, B. The next letter is Gomal. Gomal is pronounced like a G sound, G. It can also be pronounced like a soft G sound, like R, R. Gomal, G, R. The next letter is Dolath. Dolath is pronounced like a D sound in English, D. It can also be pronounced like a soft D sound, the, D, the, D, the. The next letter is He. It's pronounced like an H sound in English, H, 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 He. The next letter is Waw. It's pronounced like a W in English, W, Wow, W, Wow. The next letter is Zain. It's pronounced like a Z sound in English, Z, Zain, Z, Zain, Z. The next letter is Cheth. This one is a bit tricky to pronounce if you're not used to Semitic languages. It's pronounced whenever the back of your tongue touches the back of the roof of your mouth, and it's pronounced more in the back of the throat, so that you get a ch sound. Ch, ch, cheth, ch, cheth. The next letter is teth. This one can also be a bit tricky to pronounce if you're not familiar with Semitic languages. This one is not the same as t in English, but it's more precise. It's a more hard, what we call in linguistics, a plosive T sound. So you want to roll your tongue in the back of your mouth so that the tip of your tongue touches the roof of your mouth, so that you make a sort of exploding or plosive T sound. Teth, teth, teth. It's not teth, but it's teth. The next letter is yud, pronounced like a Y in English. Ya, ya, yud, ya, yud. The next letter is kof, pronounced like a regular K sound in English. Kof, kof, kof. The next letter is lomad, which is pronounced like an L in English. La, la, lomad, la, la, lomad. The next letter is meme, which is pronounced like M in English. Meme, m, meme. The next letter is noon, pronounced like an N in English. N, noon. N, noon. The next letter is simkath, pronounced like an S in English. S, simkath, simkath. The next letter is ea. This one is a bit tricky if you're not familiar with Semitic languages. This one is pronounced in the very back of your throat. Sometimes the Hebrew equivalent, ayin, is compared to this letter as being pronounced like the sound of a camel. So if you can imagine the sound of a camel, it's a sound that occurs very deep in your throat. So it's not ah, it's This one can be a little tricky at first to pronounce, but as we start to practice words in Syriac and you hear it sound, it should become easier. The next letter is fe. This one is sometimes pronounced as a p sound, a hard P sound, but for the most part, today it is pronounced only as f. Fe, f, fe, f, fe, f, fe. The next letter is tsode. Tsode is pronounced as if you take a T sound in English and combine it with an S sound, together making ts, ts, tsode, 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 ts, tsode. The next letter is kof. Kof is not the same as kof that we saw previously. This is not the same as a K sound in English, but it's more specific. Just like how there are two T sounds in Syriac, we saw the plosive t, and then the regular T sound, t, 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 t. Likewise, for the K sounds, there are two. We have the k, and then the k, which is more of a plosive sound. Kof, then, is the plosive sound. K, k, kof, kof. Oof, 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 oof. This one can be a bit tricky to pronounce, but as we start to see examples later in the course, you'll find that it gets easier as we go to pronounce. If it's too hard for you to pronounce kof, then you can pronounce it like the other kof without giving it much distinguishment, and it should be fine. The next letter is rish, pronounced like an R sound in English. Actually, it's more like a thrilled R sound that you would hear in Italian. Rish, 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 ra, rish, ra, rish. The next letter is sheen, pronounced like an SH sound in English. Sh, sheen, sh, sheen, sh, sheen. And the final letter is tau, pronounced like a regular T sound in English. T, tau, t, tau. So these are the main forms of the Olaph-Beth, and I encourage you to pause the video, review the pronunciation, and then also to practice writing these down. You can take out a piece of paper, and on each line, just copy over and over each letter of the Olaph-Beth until you feel comfortable that you have them memorized. Now, there are actually a few of these letters that take on slightly different forms depending on if a word immediately follows or precedes it, but we will learn that as we start to learn Syriac words, and as you'll see, it's very easy and it's very obvious what the letters are when they're connected and take on these slightly different forms. For our purposes for this lesson, make sure you memorize the main forms of the letters in the Surto script that you see here, and memorize the name of the letter and their pronunciation. A few notes on the Olaph-Beth that we need to mention here. If Olaf and Lomad occur together, then they are written a little bit differently. The first of the two will take on the shape of the second. So here's an example. Remember that the Syriac language is written from right to left. So if we have a Lomad that is followed by Olaf, then it is written like this. It's not written like this one, the way this one is written. The Lomad here is written with the Olaf here, but rather the Lomad straightens up and becomes straight up like the Olaf. On the other hand, if we have Olaf preceding the Lomad, then it's the Olaf that takes on the shape of the Lomad. However, this one is optional, and it could be written like this. Whereas if the Lomad precedes the Olaf, it is obligatory that it is written straight up like this. Now we will learn the vowels. The vowels are usually not written in Syriac, actually. In the manuscripts that we have of Syriac, you'll find that it is somewhat rare to find manuscripts that have vowels in them. The vowels, as we said earlier in the lesson, were developed around the 7th century. Syriac originally did not have the vowels, but they were developed later to help people who weren't original native Syriac speakers to learn the language and to read the text. So these are the 5 vowels we're going to learn. The first one is Phthoko, Phthoko, Phthoko. Phthoko is pronounced like an A sound in English, ah, ah. Phthoko, ah. If you can read Greek and you know the Greek alphabet, you can see that it actually kind of looks like a Greek uppercase alpha. And so if you can see the connection there, that can help you memorize that it is an A sound, ah. Phthoko, ah. The next one is Zakolfo. Zakolfo is pronounced like an O sound, O, O. Zakolfo, O. The next vowel is Robozzo. Robozzo is pronounced like an E sound in English. As you can see, it also sort of looks like a backwards uppercase or majuscule Greek epsilon. So if you can see the connection there, that can help you memorize its pronunciation. Robozzo, E. Robozzo, E. Tsotso is pronounced like a long O sound, oo, oo. Tsotso, oo. And as you can see, it kind of looks like an upside down Y, which is a majuscule Greek upsilon, which also makes the same sound, oo. So you can pronounce Tsotso as oo, oo, and make the connection with the Greek majuscule letter if you're familiar with Greek. The next one, I believe the final one, is Chobotso. Chobotso is pronounced like a long I sound in English, E, E. And as you can see, it is a slanted uppercase or majuscule Greek iota. So if you can see the connection there, that can help you with the pronunciation. Chobotso, E. Finally, we have an important punctuation here that we need to learn. These 2 dots are called sayome. They don't actually make a pronunciation or a sound for us to pronounce, but they're put over a word whenever it's plural. So just remember that if you see sayome over a word, it means that it is a plural word. Okay, so let's go over the sounds of the vowels one more time. A, O, E, U, I. A, O, E, U, I. Okay, that is all that we have for the Olaph-Beth and the vowels. Now, just a quick note on Old Syriac. We have two manuscripts in the Bible that are in the Old Syriac form. Old Syriac is sort of a traditional stage of the a transitional stage of the Syriac language between its original development of Aramaic and the form of Syriac that finally developed once you get to the early medieval ages. Old Syriac is sort of in the middle. And the Bible in Syriac is actually a really good set of text to study, to learn about the development of the Syriac language. So we have two in the Old Syriac language. We have the Syriac Sinaiticus and the Cretonian Gospels. That's what they're called. And this here is an image of the Syriac Sinaiticus. The Old Syriac version of Syriac was out of use by the 6th to 7th century, and then Syriac was vocalized in the 7th, and the vocalization, as we said previously, was based on Hebrew and Arabic. So I want you to take a closer look at this manuscript here of the Syriac Sinaiticus. As you can see, there aren't really any vowels in the manuscript. These vowels here that we just learned, you don't really see it in the older Syriac manuscripts. You see it more in late medieval Syriac manuscripts and in modern printed Syriac texts, but in the older manuscripts it's not really present. Now you may see some what look like sayome though, and some other dots as well. These other dots, don't worry about them. These don't really help us for our purposes here in our beginning stages of learning the text. At a later point in the course, we will discuss the other dots. But for now, for our purposes, I just wanted to show you that for fluent native Syriac speakers, they didn't need the vowels. Those were added at a later time. And even some modern printed texts of the Syriac language also don't have the vowels. Like this here is a modern printed text of 2nd Baruch, which survives only in its full form in Syriac. And the scholars, the editors who typed out the Syriac text for their edition of 2nd Baruch here, didn't add vowel markings. The original manuscript didn't have vowel markings, and they didn't care to add them either. But you do see some sayome here and there, like here and here and here and here. Those are very early punctuation marks in Syriac, and they help you see that there are plural words. However, if you get something like the Antioch Bible, which an example of a page from the Syriac New Testament published by Gorgias Press, a part of the Antioch Bible project that they have seen here, then you can see that they actually do have the vowels included so that people who aren't familiar with Syriac natively can learn the language. And so the New Testament in Syriac from Gorgias Press is actually a really good resource if you want to begin learning the Syriac language. Gorgias Press has a lot of great resources. They have lexicons, they have primers, they have grammars, and they have texts like this that have the Syriac with English translation facing it to aid you in your study to begin learning Syriac. So that is the end of our first lesson. For your homework, I recommend that you go over the Olaph-Beth several times, go through each letter one by one, write it down over and over, and pronounce it out loud to yourself until you have it memorized. As well as the vowels, you need to have them memorized. You don't actually need to know the names of the vowels. Those are just the names. But when you read the text, the skill that you need to develop is seeing the vowel and recognizing what sound you're supposed to make. That's the important thing. So don't worry about learning the names of the vowels. What's more important is to learn how to pronounce each one. A, O, E, U, I. Okay, I think that is all. Another exercise you can do for your homework is to open up the Antioch Bible, a section from the New Testament, If you can see the vowels here and attempt to read, just say the first line here in the text. If it's a bit unclear, I can send this to you. So that is all I have. Thank you for watching and for your attention. I hope that we learned something good from Syriac in this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.